Have you ever wondered if you could get your hands on a secret that would unlock the locks of a lost civilization? A clue that is written in not just one, but 3 different languages? It seems as if the answer to an old riddle is just in front of your eyes. It just needs to be understood. This was the Rosetta Stone, a stone that turned out to be not just a stone, but a time machine that was going to tell us the secret of Egyptian civilization thousands of years ago. It helped historians decode a language that was previously simply an unsolved mystery. So today, let us know the exciting secret behind this stone and the amazing story of its discovery, a story that was one of the biggest breakthroughs in modern history. For over 1,400 years, humanity had been staring at the walls of ancient Egyptian temples, tombs, and monuments, unable to read a single word. The hieroglyphs, those mysterious symbols of birds, eyes, and geometric shapes, had been mocking us, hiding the secrets of one of the world's greatest civilizations. Think about it. We had lost an entire language. Imagine if tomorrow no one could read English, Spanish, or Mandarin. All our books, our signs, our texts, meaningless squiggles. That's exactly what happened to Egyptian hieroglyphs. An entire civilization's voice had been silenced until one fateful day. Today, I'm going to tell you the absolutely mind-blowing story of how a single black stone found by accident became the key that unlocked 3,000 years of hidden history. This isn't just a story about archaeology. It's a story about obsession, rivalry, war, and the relentless human desire to understand our past. But first, let me paint you a picture of the world before the Rosetta Stone.
For centuries, European explorers and scholars had been fascinated by Egypt. They'd seen the pyramids, those massive monuments that seemed to defy logic and engineering. They'd walked through temples covered in strange symbols. But here's the shocking part. Nobody, and I mean nobody, could read any of it. The last person who could read hieroglyphs probably died around 400 AD. Think about that timeline. From 400 AD to 1799, that's nearly 1,400 years of silence. The Renaissance came and went. Shakespeare wrote his plays. Newton discovered gravity. The American Revolution happened. And through all of this, the hieroglyphs remained a complete mystery. European scholars made wild guesses. Some thought hieroglyphs were magical symbols with mystical powers. Others believed they were purely decorative, just ancient Egyptian art with no meaning at all. One scholar even suggested they were musical notes. Can you imagine? The entire history of ancient Egypt being one long song that nobody could play. The situation was so desperate that in the 1700s, a German scholar named Athanasius Kircher claimed he had cracked the code. He published translations that said things like, "The protection of Osiris against the violence of Typho must be elicited according to the proper rites and ceremonies." Sounds impressive, right? There was just one problem. He was completely, utterly, embarrassingly wrong. Every single translation was pure fantasy. Enter Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, when you think of Napoleon, you probably think of a short French general conquering Europe. But here's something that might shock you. Napoleon was absolutely obsessed with ancient Egypt. He didn't just want to conquer Egypt militarily. He wanted to own its history. In 1798, Napoleon launched what might be the most ambitious military scientific expedition in history. Picture this. Along with 36,000 soldiers, he brought 167 scholars. These weren't just any scholars. We're talking about the cream of French academia. Mathematicians, engineers, artists, linguists, botanists, and archaeologists. They called themselves the savants. Why would a military general bring scholars to war? Because Napoleon understood something profound.
Controlling history is as powerful as controlling territory. He wanted France to be the nation that solved the mystery of ancient Egypt. It would be the ultimate intellectual victory. These scholars measured everything. They drew everything. They cataloged monuments, copied inscriptions, and even tried to measure the pyramids, which, by the way, is incredibly dangerous. Several of them died trying. They were creating what would become the Description de l'Egypte, a massive 23-volume encyclopedia of everything Egyptian. But despite all their efforts, the hieroglyphs remained silent. They could copy them, draw them beautifully, but they couldn't read a single word. It must have been maddening. Then came July 15, 1799. The scene? Fort Julian, near the town of Rosetta in the Nile Delta. French soldiers under the command of Pierre-François Bouchard were doing what soldiers do during occupation, boring construction work. They were strengthening the fort's defenses, digging foundations, moving rocks. One soldier's shovel hit something different. Not regular sandstone, but something dark, almost black. As they clear away the dirt, they realize this isn't just any stone. It's covered in writing. 3 different scripts, carved deep into the granite. Now, here's where Bouchard becomes a hero of history. He could have just used the stone for construction. After all, they needed building materials. But Bouchard was educated enough to recognize Greek letters in one section. He immediately realized this could be important. The stone was about 3 feet 9 inches tall, 2 feet 4 inches wide, and 11 inches thick. It weighed about 1,680 pounds. That's as heavy as a small car. The top was broken, and the corners were damaged, but the writing was mostly intact. Bouchard reported the discovery to his superior, General Jacques-François Menu. Now, Menu was quite a character. He had converted to Islam and married an Egyptian woman. He immediately recognized the stone's importance and had it transported to Cairo. When the French scholars in Cairo saw the stone, they went absolutely crazy with excitement. Here's why. They could read the bottom section. It was in ancient Greek. The middle section was in a script they called Demotic, a cursive form of Egyptian writing. And the top section? Those were hieroglyphs. Even without being able to read the hieroglyphs, they understood the explosive implication. This was the same text written 3 times in 3 different languages. It was like finding a Google Translate from the ancient world. The French scholars immediately got to work making copies. They used a technique called rubbing, placing paper over the stone and rubbing it with charcoal to capture every detail. They made multiple copies, and it's a good thing they did. Why? Because France was about to lose the stone.
See, while all this archaeological excitement was happening, Napoleon's military campaign was falling apart. The British Navy, under Admiral Nelson, had destroyed the French fleet. Napoleon had abandoned his army and returned to France. The French forces in Egypt were trapped. In 1801, the French surrendered to the British. And here's where things get interesting and controversial. According to the terms of surrender, the French had to hand over all the antiquities they'd collected. The French scholars protested. Some even threatened to burn all their research rather than hand it over. General Menu tried to claim the Rosetta Stone was his personal property. Nice try, but it didn't work. The British were taking that stone, and there was nothing the French could do about it. But here's the clever part. The French had already sent copies of the inscriptions back to France. The race to decipher the hieroglyphs was about to become an international competition. The Rosetta Stone arrived in Portsmouth in February 1802. It was presented to King George III, who immediately donated it to the British Museum. The museum put it on public display, and it caused an absolute sensation. People lined up for hours just to see this mysterious black stone. Remember, this was an era before television, before photographs were common.
Seeing an actual ancient Egyptian artifact was like magic for most people. The British Museum became the center of the decipherment efforts. Scholars from across Europe came to study it. They made more copies. Plaster casts were created and sent to universities across Europe. But having the stone and reading it were two very different things. The Greek text told them what the hieroglyphs should say, but how did those strange symbols actually work? Now we come to the real heroes of our story, the code breakers, and what a cast of characters they were. First, there was Sylvestre de Sacy from France, a linguistic genius who spoke over a dozen languages. He started with the Demotic script, thinking it would be easier than hieroglyphs. He managed to identify where proper names should be, but couldn't crack the actual letters. Then came Johann Åkerblad, a Swedish diplomat and Orientalist. Working from de Sacy's notes, he identified several Demotic characters correctly. He found the words for Greek, temple, and love. But he made a crucial error. He assumed Demotic was entirely alphabetic, like European languages. This assumption would slow progress for years. Enter Thomas Young, and this guy was something else. He was a medical doctor who also happened to be a physicist. He proved that light was a wave. A physiologist, he figured out how the eye focuses, and spoke 13 languages. In his spare time, he decided to crack the Rosetta Stone, as you do. Young made a brilliant breakthrough in 1814. He realized that the cartouches, those oval shapes in the hieroglyphs, contained royal names. He correctly identified Ptolemy. But here's what's amazing. Young figured out that hieroglyphs weren't just picture writing. Some symbols represented sounds. This was revolutionary. Everyone had assumed hieroglyphs were like Chinese characters, each symbol representing a word or idea. Young showed that wasn't entirely true, but he couldn't quite crack the system. Meanwhile, in France, a young man was obsessing over the same problem. His name was Jean-François Champollion, and he had been preparing for this moment his entire life.
Champollion was a child prodigy. By age 16, he spoke Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Arabic, Syriac, and Coptic. Why Coptic? Because Coptic was the last stage of the Egyptian language, still used in Egyptian Christian churches. Champollion believed, correctly, that understanding Coptic was key to understanding ancient Egyptian. The rivalry between Young and Champollion was intense. They were racing to be the first to fully decipher hieroglyphs. Young was methodical, scientific. Champollion was intuitive, almost mystical in his approach. September 14th, 1822. Mark this date in your calendars because this is the day the ancient Egyptians began to speak again. Champollion had been working on cartouches from other inscriptions, not just the Rosetta Stone. He was looking at a cartouche from the Temple of Abu Simbel. He could read some symbols phonetically, S, S, H, H. The last two symbols were the same. They made an S sound. The first symbol was a circle with a dot, the sun. In Coptic, the word for sun was Ra. Could the first symbol be Ra? If so, the name would be Ra, H, S, S. Then it hit in like lightning. The second symbol looked like a three-pronged shape. In Coptic, the word for birth was Mes. Ra, Mes, S. Ramesses. He had just read the name of one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. According to legend, Champollion ran to his brother's office, shouted, "Je tiens mon affaire," "I've got it," and promptly fainted from excitement. He was unconscious for 5 days.
When he recovered, Champollion worked feverishly. He realized hieroglyphs were a complex system. Some symbols represented sounds, phonetic. Some represented ideas, ideographic. And some gave clues about meaning, determinatives. It was like having an alphabet, emojis, and punctuation all mixed together.
So after all this drama, what does the Rosetta Stone actually say? Brace yourself for disappointment. It's basically ancient government bureaucracy. The stone is a decree issued in 196 BCE by priests in Memphis honoring the teenage pharaoh Ptolemy V. It's essentially a tax document mixed with religious propaganda. Here are the highlights. Ptolemy V is declared a god, standard pharaoh stuff. He reduced taxes, popular move. He freed prisoners, very generous. He gave gifts to temples, keeping priests happy. His birthday and coronation day would be celebrated annually. Priests would serve him like other gods. This decree should be posted in every temple in 3 languages. It's not poetry. It's not profound wisdom. It's ancient government PR. But that's exactly what made it perfect for decipherment. It was formal, repetitive language full of standard phrases and royal titles. The most important line might be the last one. The instruction to write this in sacred writing, hieroglyphs, document writing, demotic, and Greek writing. This tells us the stone was deliberately created as a multilingual document for a multicultural society. Once Champollion cracked the code, it was like a dam burst. Suddenly the walls of every temple, every tomb, every monument in Egypt could speak. And what stories they told. We learned that the pyramids weren't built by slaves, but by paid workers who got meat and beer. We discovered love poems, medical texts, and shopping lists. We found out that ancient Egyptians had a great sense of humor. There's even an ancient joke book. The underground chambers in pyramids, not mystical study rooms for priests, but elaborate preparations for the afterlife. Those weird animal-headed gods, they represented complex theological concepts about the nature of divinity and the cosmos.
We discovered the names of forgotten pharaohs, lost battles, ancient treaties. We learned about Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh who wore a false beard. We read about Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who tried to convert Egypt to monotheism. Every museum in the world suddenly had to relabel their Egyptian collections. Mysterious artifacts became household items, religious texts, or personal letters. It was like the entire ancient Egyptian civilization had suddenly woken up and started talking. Today, the Rosetta Stone sits in the British Museum, where 6 million people visited every year. It's been there for over 220 years, except for one brief period during World War I when it was hidden in a London underground station to protect it from bombing. Egypt has repeatedly asked for its return, arguing it's a fundamental part of their cultural heritage. The British Museum maintains it's better preserved and accessible where it is. The debate continues. But perhaps the stone's physical location matters less than what it achieved. The Rosetta Stone didn't just translate a language, it resurrected an entire civilization. It proved that no knowledge is ever truly lost, just waiting for the right key to unlock it. The next time you see hieroglyphs, in a museum, in a movie, even in an emoji that looks suspiciously like an ancient Egyptian symbol, remember that we can read them because of a chance discovery by French soldiers, preserved by British imperialism, and decoded by brilliant minds racing against each other for glory. The Rosetta Stone reminds us that human curiosity, persistence, and ingenuity can overcome even 1,400 years of silence. It makes you wonder, what other mysteries are out there waiting for their Rosetta Stone moment?